Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Monday Q&As. So let's do it. What cooking processes are the worst and why? I recall you making a comment to the effect of chips. For the non-Brits, chips means French fries. Being an awful carb source for vegans because of something to do with the effects of being fried in heated oil. Similarly, I've read articles about the presence of carcinogens in food, mostly meat that have been fried or overly grilled. Yeah, anything that's deep fried or that's char grilled till it's got black edges is not a good idea for health reasons. And the reason is there's a lot of issues going on with potential carcinogens from deep frying, breaking down fats into types of fatty acids that you don't necessarily want into your body, and just adding the large amounts of low satiety fats to your diet, or just refined vegetable oil. And I'm not saying these things in moderation are bad, because most foods, even that we think of as junk or unhealthy foods, in moderation, the negative effects are going to be minimal to non-existent. It's consuming too much of them. So that's what you need to be aware of. And I'm not saying you should never eat fried foods if you love them, but they need to be an occasional thing, not something you're doing every day. Now, as far as char grilled things, yeah, particularly red meat when it's overly cooked, so it has black edges or it's charred, things like that tends to have the highest carcinogens. Been linked to a lot of issues as far as potential colon cancer, things like that. So yeah, you definitely want to avoid cooking meat until it's charred at all. And you want to avoid fried foods, fried in oil, like deep fried, as much as possible. I'm not saying they need to be avoided completely, they just need to be kept to a very, very low level. Alright, next question. Is the rate of growth for hair and fingernails affected by being in a calorie deficit versus a surplus? Alright, this is going to be one of the rare times that you see me say this, but the answer to this question is, I don't know. I have no clue. I'm not even sure where to begin searching for an answer. I could hypothesize all day long, but because I really have no data to work with, I have no idea. I'm not going to hypothesize. You got me. You freaking got me on a fitness question. I don't have the answer. So let's go to the next question. Are there any researches confirming that in the past men used to have higher test level and therefore modern true naturals wouldn't be able to be as strong and big as pre-steroid era bodybuilders / strength athletes? Okay, this data is, there's data debating this regarding the size of the Y chromosome reducing over time, but this goes back to very, very long periods of time, not just the pre-steroid era. Now, the other thing to consider is that people are calling the pre-steroid era oftentimes isn't the pre-steroid era or the pre-drug era. Anabolic steroids, I've seen people, at least from older lifters who've seen older documents, suggesting that some athletes may have been using testosterone as early as 1915. That is exactly 100 years ago. It's uncontested that they were using them in the 40s in Europe, that the Nazis were using them in soldiers and athletes. And by the 1950s, they were pretty much universal in both the US, Russia, possibly parts of Europe like the UK. There is no dispute or debate about the fact that they were already used by serious athletes and to some extent bodybuilders who knew the Olympic lifting teams. So you get to those eras undisputed, but even going further back, there's definitely some possibilities that they were on testosterone and possible other anabolics. Before then, they just weren't officially talking about them. There's a lot of people who think they existed and who have some evidence that they've held onto of their own that suggests they existed. So what we're calling the pre-steroid era is speculation at best. It's subject to debate. But as far as going further back than that, natural testosterone production, as long as you're in the healthy range versus someone who's really, really high levels, the difference in muscular development is very, very small. It's not as big as people want to make it out to be. They're not going to carry 20 pounds more muscle than you as a result of it. It's a very small amount, a few pounds. So that's really not the way to look at it. Now, as far as it being further back in history of that making a difference in our overall behavior and development and other things, yeah, there does seem to be some evidence. It's not conclusive data that I'm aware of, but there's definitely data out there that suggests that due to the reducing size of the Y chromosome over time, that testosterone production may have been reduced over time a bit also. But to my knowledge, this is nothing conclusive on it. It's an interesting hypothesis for now with some supporting data, but who really knows at this point? Maybe we'll learn more about it later. All right, next question. When you ate meat, how did you like your steak cooked? I pin you as a medium rare man. Again, I don't really eat red meat anymore, but I did grow up on a ranch, grew up around a lot of steak, a lot of red meat. I'm a very rare guy. I'll do medium rare, or did do medium rare, but I generally preferred it bloody. So I liked it up to blue, for those who are familiar with that term. So very, very rare. I did really like steak particularly cooked. And I like minimum seasoning on it. I don't actually prefer the taste of seasoning. I prefer the taste of barely cooked steak. All right, next question. Regarding TRT injections, should one be worried about scar tissue from these 4 milliliter injections in the glutes every 10 weeks, by the way? Yeah, you're using the test to coinate. I'm going to assume since you're getting that for full TRT, very few countries do that, like maybe Canada, a couple countries in Europe do that. I don't think it's fully going in the US yet. I could be wrong. So I'm suspecting you're not US because it's not that widespread yet. Should you be expecting scar tissue from that? Yeah, a small amount, but because it's such a big muscle, the glute, and that's once every 10 weeks, but rotating glutes usually, that's not very much. There's a handful of shots a year in each glute. It might accumulate a little scar tissue, but it's going to be very, very little. It's not enough that you really need to worry about it if they're just rubbing it in, and it's going to be such a small amount, you could break it up easily with a bit of massaging or foam rolling. I really wouldn't worry about it with that. That's so minimal. You're trying to compare that with the guys who are pinning large and large amounts, like guys like Boston Lloyd. We're talking about scar tissue in arms. We're talking about every 20 weeks, once every 20 weeks, 4 milliliters in a giant muscle like a glute, versus him doing 6 milliliters in his little bitty tricep. Compare that to the glute every single week. So over the course of 20 weeks, that is 120 milliliters in one muscle compared to 4 milliliters in a bigger muscle. The difference is dramatic. You don't need to worry compared to what some of these other guys are doing. That's why they're getting all that scar tissue. All right, next question. Hi Jason, I'm on holiday and I won't be lifting for nearly a week. Do I still need the same protein intake as I normally would, or is it my total daily calories that's important? Honestly, it's a bit of both, and I'm not saying you need a large amount of protein. You need to hit the minimum numbers that I usually recommend at minimum 1 gram per kilo of body weight. And if you're going below that and you're not training, yeah, you're exacerbating the potential muscle loss. And I know it's only a week, but you do need to preserve your muscle tissue. You're not training for a week to stimulate any new growth. Your body might be prone to losing a little bit of muscle and a little bit of extra protein. Getting a nice, decent amount of protein is going to be beneficial in stalling that process a little bit. So I certainly wouldn't cut my protein intake way back. If you're not going to be able to train for a week, you're just asking to lose a little bit more muscle tissue than you normally would. So why risk it? There's no benefit. You don't need to be eating massive amounts, but you do need to eat that minimum threshold that I recommend. So yeah, your needs don't really change in that situation. Unless you want to lose a little bit more muscle tissue, which you worked for it, you trained for it, why give it up over something so small? So no, don't do that. All right, next question. Is it physiologically possible for the body to use stored body fat to build nerve tissue, hormones, and so on, or is body fat a fuel-only thing? No, it's just like any other tissue in your body. Your fat stores, your adipose tissue, is metabolically active. It is turning over all the time. Your fat cells are both shrinking and growing continually. There's energy coming into them and energy flowing back out of them that your body needs. So it's a living metabolic tissue with blood flow to it, so there's a little bit of trickle in and out all the time. So to say that a little bit of it that's trickling out is fatty acids into the bloodstream isn't being used for maybe the nylon sheaths on your nerves to rebuild some of that. Although those tend to be certain specialized fatty acids. They're not always the same type you always have stored in your fat tissue, depending on the composition of your diet. But as far as even making hormones, yeah, some of that's going towards all those different things that your body would use triglycerides for. You are pulling energy out of your fat cells all the time, whether you're dieting or not. It's just that what you get is that sometimes the energy going in is exceeding what's going out. And so the fat cells grow in the same thing. Maybe the energy going out of them is lower than the energy going in them, and you're in a calorie deficit and cutting. And so they're getting smaller, even though that's being burned as fuel, but it doesn't mean some of it isn't being used for other purposes. Some of your basic metabolic functions, which would include things like hormone production, need actual fatty acids to do, and sometimes they'll pull those fatty acids from your fat tissue if need be, if it isn't being supplied in your diet. So yeah, it can absolutely be used for those things. It's just that that building nerves is a completely different issue, and I don't want to focus on that because that's a whole nother topic. That one's a little more iffy. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hi Jason, I rarely see you talking about stimulants like caffeine and other stimulants. Really all those coffee chats? Does drinking too much coffee damaging your central nervous system? I love coffee. You know, that last sentence was hard for me to read, but I love coffee too. And as far as caffeine, well, caffeine itself in excess, just like the other stimulant, probably isn't the greatest thing for you in the world. But when you look at something like coffee, it seems to have health negatives and health benefits both. So it's a matter of weighing out the pros and the cons. People who are very anxiety prone, that caffeine in the coffee could be a problem for you. People who have a history of certain types of heart defects and heart attacks, coffee could be a problem for them. But for other situations, a coffee has health benefits, and that would include the caffeine, because the real coffee that we're thinking of that has these benefits has caffeine in it. And that's things like effect on blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity, all those things related that will impact rates of diabetes. Coffee is excellent for those things. It improves those health markers, and there's a lot of data over the years showing that. So it isn't an all bad thing, and in some cases, in excess or people with certain conditions, yeah, it can be bad for you. It can be bad for your nervous system, bad for your heart in those situations. But in most other situations, there are absolute health benefits to coffee, and the caffeine is just part of that. Now, you may not get those benefits if you're just popping a caffeine pill, which is why I generally recommend drink the coffee. Coffee's awesome, rather than popping just a caffeine pill instead of it for the caffeine. So hopefully that answers your question. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. Let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh, Mount Bicepius.